Welcome back to New York City from a month-long trip. I want to hear all about it, and all my best to the people in Natura Carta. It's really good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you.
And in the audience, welcome very much to Conversations. It's a pleasure and an honor to welcome to Conversations an old friend of Conversations, and I would say the world and perhaps the universe. And that's Rabbi Yisroel Weiss, or Dov Weiss, and he's a member of the Natura Carta, a prominent member of that, and he's just returned from a month-long journey overseas that included, I guess, Turkey and Gaza and so forth in the situation, along with others who were trying to, I guess, get into Gaza and alleviate the situation there. And he's got a unique take on the human condition based upon traditional Jewish reading of the Torah and important views of the universe. And Rabbi Weiss, thank you for coming. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you very much for having our representative of our organization, because we feel this is a godly duty, and it's a sanctification of the Almighty when we're able to represent the true Jewish view, which is being unfortunately smeared in the gutter by people who have kidnapped our identity.
Political Zionism.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's worth emphasizing that and talking some about, because a lot of the people in the view won't be familiar with it. Why don't you share with us a little bit your view? What distinguishes the Natura Carta? And as I understand from Rabbi Dome and from others, it's really a state of mind relating to the Jewish tradition and so forth. But could you differentiate Natura Carta yourselves and what it signifies? And we could talk about it at that level.
Yeah.
And we can get down to show some about the situation currently in Gaza and that sort of thing. But share the philosophical distinction.
Right. Well, first, my prayers is to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth that I can convey it to your distinguished television watchers, and that we can so sanctify God's name. I mean, basically, Judaism is a religion of thousands of years. It is subservience to the Almighty. Zionism is the transformation of this spirituality, subservience to the Almighty, into base materialism, nationalistic goals, to have a piece of land based on selfish own wants and yearning, and has nothing. It takes God out of the equation. To explain that a little more.
No, I understand. It makes a pact with power.
Yes, and
it was like Constantine when he converted Rome.
And it was created by these people the Zionist leaders, the Zionist thinkers, were people who, in essence, were very anti-religious, detested religion. Theodor Herzl, Jabotinsky, go further, Ben Gurion, Chaim Weizmann, all these people, they detested and abhorred the religion and tried to further themselves from religion as much as possible. As I say, their goal was a nationalistic goal.
It was a political goal.
It was a political goal. So therefore, in and of itself, it is the diametric opposite. It's antithetical to Judaism. It's really contradictory to Judaism, the religion, which is, as I say, subservience to the Almighty, godliness. And godliness encompasses compassion, just as God requires of us as the creator of the universe, just as we say in Hebrew, Mahu Racham Af Ata Terachim, just as God is compassionate, you must be compassionate. The Torah encompasses two parts. One is the laws of the requirements of humankind to God, to the Almighty, keeping the Sabbath, kosher, other laws, and others that are requirements of how we should behave to our fellow human beings, of kindness, of thinking one and not hurting another fellow. Zionism is, as I said, a goal for oneself to acquire and to achieve a certain goal, and it doesn't use the ruler, the Torah as a ruler, the godly morals as a ruler, so whatever stands in its way gets trampled. And whether it's human life, whether it's other issues, and any morals. For instance, the use of the Star of David, the use of Jewish identities, which is totally godly Jewish identities, they will use
like a trademark.
Yes, without with impunity, without thinking for 1 second that how could you do this? This is it is so hypocritical because these people, as I say, detested religion. Theodor Herzl,
Theodor Herzl was an atheist, I believe, right?
We have a book called Historic Documents,
yeah.
And we have many of their writings. Theodor Herzl made an announcement in a newspaper, Tamura, it's called, that I did not circumcise my son's hands, and it's a bi-weekly that he wrote about that, and other things. He wrote that Jews of Austria should convert in his own diary. He wrote that they should convert to Catholicism, and that should be done on a Sunday with music on Pride. We are the last generation to hold on to the faith of our forefathers. In other words, they really detested this godliness, and they had another goal entirely, and yet they kept on using, and they used the Jewish identity. They kidnapped, hijacked it, because in order to get legitimacy, to gain that the world should look at them as some type of legitimate, long-standing historical entity, and that has basis in the Torah, therefore rooted in the Torah, and therefore rooted in godliness, and therefore they can waive the Torah as a deed to the right to the land of Palestine. Going back, that was the reason that they picked Palestine altogether because originally, if you would look at their first meetings in Basel, Switzerland, and before in the 19th century, 1890s, when they had plans to make their political state, the nationalism, in a productive land, a land that would have made more sense. If you want to have a lush land in those days, you're looking for ground that could produce land, and something that would. And they were thinking of Uganda. They were thinking of Patagonia, and so they had other issues. So they was totally removed from anything to do with godliness, the Torah. So this was what Zionism is. So Zionism is the transformation, as I say, of the religion into something entirely different, and it's contradictory. It's contradictory, let me just add, because of a few basic issues. Not only is the whole concept antithetical, but the Torah, ironically, God put us under oath in the Torah through words of the prophecies, King Solomon, that as a Jewish people, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we are under a decree of God not to return en masse to Palestine. We put under 3 oaths. The second oath is not to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we're residing. Thirdly, not to make any attempt to end exile. So the Zionism, with their nationalism, not only are the whole concepts really totally diametrically opposite and contradictory to Judaism, but it rebels against the laws of the Torah specifically in all these concepts of making a national home, of gathering in the people en masse to go back to Palestine. So in every facet. But wait, that's just the beginning. If they would have returned to Palestine for their convenience sake, because they had to get support from the world by presenting themselves as if they're doing God's wish for their nationalism, and it would have been in an uninhabited land, that would have been
different.
That would have been a rebellion against all the Jewish, these Jewish concepts, the Jewish issues of us, between us and the Almighty, decree of exile, that that God sent us into exile, and so forth. But being that they chose Palestine, and it was inhabited by a people, the Palestinian people, beside the Palestinian Jews. I mean, we're talking about the Muslim community and the Christian community, but the majority was Muslim. There was also a Jewish community, also very religious and anti-Zionist. But being that it was inhabited by these people, and now they're coming to create their nation, their national home in this inhabited area, so now they're stepping on the rights of this people. And this is totally forbidden by the Torah. The half of the Torah that discusses and talks about the commandments that we should not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, that one must emulate God to be compassionate, and so basically the concept of Zionism, in its total picture, it breaches the laws of the Torah. It rebels against God. It is a total transformation and a rebellion against everything that's Jewish and God. And yet, they continually, stubbornly use the identity of King David, who wrote the Psalms, and all the holiness, the name is Israel, which is Jacob in the Bible, and they present themselves this aura, this look of holiness, and wave the Bible as if they're doing something godly. And the reason, of course, is legitimacy and to intimidate the world, that anybody who dares to speak up against them should be stamped as anti-Semitic.
Yeah, okay, there's a bunch of things you had in there. A couple of words I heard that came through very clear to me, right? One is transformation. Rabbi Dome wrote a book called The Transformation, which is exactly what you were saying, that they were moving toward a secular world. There was a lot of that going on. Another word I heard you say is legitimacy.
Right.
And that's something I'm very interested in the programming we're doing all this week, is on the idea of how in a world where somebody has a lot of power and ability to establish their rule over others and so forth, they want to claim for their vision of things legitimacy. And I think you would question at a very basic level of Judaism itself and the interpretation of the Torah that it held for thousands of years and was the attitude of vast majority of the Jewish community when first these radical people were proclaiming Zionism as a goal, that it was a blasphemy of any understanding that the Torah provided, but that they are then illegitimate in a historical context and should not be granted the crown of assuming that they are legitimate against illegitimate radical forces that want to overthrow them. And then it seems to me one other thing I would suggest is that entity, that political entity, Israel, is joined at the hip, as they say, with the United States of America, and the United States of America made it possible, supports it overwhelmingly, AIPAC and so forth, tremendous support for that state that continues, and they're joined at the hip. And the same thing could be said of the United States of America, which in triumphal power over ability to have sway over the world after the implosion of the Soviet Union and so forth, triumphalism, they claim historical legitimacy, that they have a system in place that's going to serve, this is more at a secular level, is going to serve the interests of all the world. They are the leaders of the world, they are the Rome, they are the emperor, they have the picture, and that they are also illegitimate in a historical sense, that they do not have a system that is able to meet the needs of the world, or much less the citizens of the world, or the ecology. The systems that they've inherited and enshrined out of history are not adequate what the future requires, and there's a question of the illegitimacy of those leaders who claim legitimacy, and their legitimacy should be questioned at fundamental level. What do you think?
Well, again, of course, you've just said a mouthful, like they were saying a lot of things.
Well, you're saying a mouthful through all your whole thing. You're saying a mouthful. You're questioning. You're not questioning about there should be more land given here, or this village there, or this little change here. So you're talking about the whole, questioning at the level of the legitimacy of the overall proposition.
Right, and
as it should be done.
So let us just dissect that a little bit, because there's many issues, of course.
On one hand and on the other, yes.
Right. So let's start. First of all, with God's help, as I said, we have. Well, in these historical documents that we have the writing right in its inception, the concept of Zionism, when they started coming up to the land of Palestine to enforce or to be able to come to this statehood and so forth. This was like over
before
100 years ago.
1948.
This was way before. It was the beginning of the 20th century.
Okay, thank you.
So immediately the chief rabbi at that time was Rabbi Sonnenfeld, and he went and had a meeting with, in 1924, let's just say, with King Hussein of the Hejaz. He was the ancestor of King Abdullah of Jordan. And again, to show their loyalty, and they had a meeting. And I'll skip over all these historic things, but to just understand and take it in context that the Jewish population living in Palestine was 95% most probably very religious at the time.
Right. By that you mean Orthodox.
Orthodox, right.
Okay, make that distinction, because you're Orthodox. You appear Orthodox.
Right. And so the concept is that people who were living in Palestine throughout the hundreds of years, where people didn't go there for material gains, they went there because of spirituality.
Yes.
So it was an overwhelming, very religious community led by the rabbinical authorities. And therefore, when Zionism came, this new concept of nationalism, it was looked as
Well, first of all,
people that were coming to just
Yeah,
bear with
okay.
me a minute,
Yeah,
they're coming as a danger to the society.
Absolutely,
and
it
therefore
was.
they opposed it. And I'll skip all the way over to 1947, which was a year before.
let me go
the
back
official,
a second.
Yeah.
Don't lose it.
Yes.
1947. I won't let you
Yeah.
forget it. We'll get back to it.
Yes.
1924, 1910.
Yes.
When first the Zionist thing came out, they were radicals. They were, as the atheist Jews, they were
Exactly.
radicals. Virtually everybody within the Jewish
Opposed them.
community was
Right.
totally opposed
Right,
to it
that's,
because it
yeah.
ran counter and was blasphemous in terms
Right.
of what the Torah clearly
Exactly.
spelled out.
So,
is that not
yes,
correct?
That
is that not correct?
100% correct.
Okay.
Therefore, I mean, it's like trying to say, for instance, that Christianity, you will, when the Pope died, and they would take somebody who was an atheist because he was a very gifted speaker or
and had
a
political
brilliant
clout.
person and he knew many languages, whatever. So everybody said that's ridiculous. So to say that there is atheistic Christianity, or any type of religion, or Muslim, you would say that, well, that can't be. You can't so say, well, the guy will come along and say, I have a lot of numbers of backers. That the majority of people today will call themselves Christian or
Somebody
back me,
said,
and they don't believe.
How big is the army of the Pope? Somebody once said.
Oh, yeah. So basically,
make
in
a
other
joke
words,
of it.
they're going to. In other words, they're going to. He may say, I have a majority of people following me who are from Christian heritage, but they don't believe in God. So everybody would say, well, that's ridiculous. Here we have Judaism, which is a religion.
Yeah.
It was the whole concept. What is Judaism? As I say, subservience, the acceptance, subservience to the Almighty, acceptance of a bond, which with God, which is the acceptance of the 613 commandments on Mount Sinai. That's all it means. It's a commandment that's an acceptance of this.
And it held them together for a couple thousand years in diaspora, had
yes,
it not?
because but that's
adherence to the Torah.
Right.
That was important.
I'm not even going off on that. What holds us to, in other words, whether it would be successful or not. We're talking about the fact, what does it mean to be a Jew?
All right.
So this bond with the Almighty, which we say God said you should be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation on Mount Sinai. In other words, we believe, of course, just a little aside, that everybody was created by the Almighty. Everybody has to believe that God gave Moses the Torah and said, thou shalt not kill, steal, commit adultery, believe in one God. You must,
and also,
and not to. And if you do these things and not to worship, idol worship, basically, if you do these commandments, if you don't not to eat from an animal while it's alive, while it's still shaking. If you do these things, you're a righteous human being. Elijah the prophet and our law books, Maimonides writes, then they will inherit the world to come. As a Jew, we do not believe you have to be Jewish to serve God.
Let me talk there. You inherit the world and so forth, because it helped me, because I'm not a scholar of the Torah, okay? Or they have another thing, the Talmud, interpretation. You're a scholar of that, so help me out a little bit, because the Torah provided a clear, undeniable interpretation of the terms and the means by which, at what is termed the end time, the return to build the second temple, the return to that they cleared out clearly how that would be done. And if I'm not mistaken, don't set me straight. First of all, it would not be so much at a material level, it would be within an elevated context. It's an elevated context where the world would be characterized, the world of mankind would be characterized by universal justice. It would be done without any weapons whatsoever. Correct. It would be done only with the full compliance of the people who were there, and would not violate anyone. And so that for this reason, just in secular terms, the idea of picking up arms and going and building Apache helicopters and fighting and winning out over them is something that is specifically violated by the political Zionism according to the long-held traditions of the Torah, no?
Very eloquently put, and let me explain, and that fits exactly what we're trying to say. The basic, that was just, let me put it in context here with what I'm trying with God's help to say, is that basically Judaism says that God created the world, everybody has to serve God. We made a bond with the Almighty on Mount Sinai of extra commandments. We should be a nation, a kingdom it's a Hebrew verse in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, says you should be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. In other words, we're saying that everybody is special, everybody is special to the Almighty, and if they serve the Almighty in their good, then they will inherit the world to come. But we
inherit the world to come.
We believe that there's a future.
Tell me what you mean by that. Are you talking historical?
No,
or otherworldly?
Otherworldly.
Okay, that's different. Okay, I just want to get it straight.
But basically,
because we're talking about a return to the Second Temple building.
No, that's not where we're going. That's another issue.
Okay. You understand where I'm getting at, though.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to. But the Jewish issue is that we made a bond of being a nation of priests with God, that we have to keep 613 commandments, and that's what the whole concept of Judaism is: a nation of priests that we're quiet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, subservience to the Almighty.
Help me on another thing.
Wait.
We're going to get back to 47. We're not going to miss it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you're Orthodox.
Right.
Now, what about the people who are? And there's been a lot of science and and you got Reform, you got all the other things in terms of Jude. They still say they read the Torah, the Talmud. They interpret it in a different kind of way, and they're able to 100% support the political state of Israel, whereas you have an objection to it. Just want to make that point.
They cannot represent Judaism, because Judaism, as we were saying again, is this a bond that we made on Mount Sinai that doesn't give us the
leeway.
space, the leeway to pick and choose what you want. It's a bond with God that God gave the Torah.
It specifically violates the reading of the Torah and the commandment.
And that's what Judaism means, that we accept this bond. We have been doing this for thousands of years.
Yes, and it served well.
And this is what, and our rabbinical authorities are the ones who were the leaders, because they were the ones who, helped the generation, were knowledgeable and presented the Torah in its proper context. And so basically, this is the way Judaism went along. Zionism comes along, and they came with that you don't have to be subservient to the Almighty, and you could directly rebel against, ignore what the Torah requires. As I say, Theodor Herzl made an announcement, one of the basic covenants of the Torah, that he's not circumcising his son. Or I should mention Zev Jabotinsky, the mentor of Begin, wrote in an article. I mean, this is so weird.
That's revisionist.
Yeah, and he wrote, let's just quote him, in an article outside the camp in a newspaper, it was called Chadashis Haaretz in 1919, he wrote, in the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of gullus, that means of exile, and they deny to shave off their beards and their payas, this is called payas, will be second-class citizens and will not have the right to vote. So imagine, you think this is a Nazi writing, this isn't. So they were totally...
they did. The Zionists collaborated with the Nazi regime. Right. The flag of the David flag flew in Nazi Germany.
True, but
they collaborated with the Nazis.
Well, I'm just showing that they were totally opposed to all the concepts of subservience to God, of the bond that we have with God. So it's really weird that and ridiculous, and that they come and they say that they're representing Judaism. And understandably, all the rabbinical authorities.
Well, it's a great brand.
Yeah,
it's a great brand
exactly,
that you can market.
Well, we just put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, where it's 130 years of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism.
Give it a little time for them to come in on this, if you can, with the camera. Let me hold you. Talk.
And basically, so you see, these are just the leaders universally of Sephardic, Ashkenazic, in other words, Jews from the Middle East, from Africa, from Eastern Europe, and all the leaders, their vehement opposition to this whole Zionism in every facet, as we say, their contradiction to God, to Torah, to subservience to God, and their breaching of all the laws of the Torah. So this is clear, and that's why.
How can you be so anti-Semitic?
So exactly. So that's basically the issue that we have here.
Yeah.
But let's just go to 1947 when we're talking about when they decided to go to Palestine, and they almost had ratified in the UN the right, getting the right of the so-called of the world nations to create this state of Israel. So the chief rabbi of the Palestinian Jews, Rabbi Dushinsky, and it's in the documents of the UN, and document number A-AC 1447, he wrote actually a declaration before the United Nations in July 16, 1947, that people still alive today who remember delivering this letter in Palestine from the Jewish people who are anti-Zionists that are living in Jerusalem. And they went, and I'm just going to read one sentence from the letter, which was delivered to the United Nations. He wrote, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." This was July. Now, 3 months in November, when they were getting back the feedback that imminently there is going to be a so-called Jewish state, and they were being ignored, that the Jewish community was being ignored by the United Nations, and that the United Nations was accepting the representatives of the Zionist movement as the representatives of the Jewish people, and it's going to be forced on the Jewish people living in Palestine, this state of Israel, this so-called Jewish state. So he wrote a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, in which I'll just read, it's a paragraph.
What year we are, 47?
This is 1947. 1948 was the creation of the state. And the chief
UN
rabbi,
was just getting going.
right, and he wrote to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Lake Success. He wrote the Jewish,
Lake Success, yeah.
He wrote the Jewish Orthodox community of Jerusalem, comprising 60,000 souls, 60,000 souls, objects to the plea of including Jerusalem in the Jewish state, and or its residents becoming automatically citizens of the Jewish state. In other words, he's saying, you're forcing upon this community here, but at least leave me Jerusalem. Now quoting him further, "Our community demands that Jerusalem be an international zone under your protection, with full autonomy, and its residents be free citizens of the international zone of Jerusalem." It's signed Chief Rabbi J. Dushinsky. So basically, what we I just want to put in context
into the political,
that the Jewish people always, the ones who are true to Judaism, never had the wool pulled over their eyes. They always opposed Zionism in every facet. They hurt and felt and were humiliated by they
a blasphemy
by what was being done in their name to their neighbors, to their Palestinian neighbors.
And if they were true Jew and they were true to their Torah and so forth, what they could celebrate, what they would experience that as is not just a political blunder or something, but a blasphemy.
Exactly, a blasphemy. And the rabbis wrote it, as we say. If anybody would bother looking in their book, Rabbis Speak Out, you would find encompassing that nobody could refute. These are the world leaders of Judaism.
And if it's a blasphemy, as much as the trademark might be good to sell in the market of weapons or money or whatever, it still is what's the word in Yiddish? Erzatz. No, erzatz is fake.
Fake.
Illegitimate. Illegitimate.
And not a replacement.
No, but you understand, we're back again to that theme of the illegitimacy of the people who are walking the league with big. And don't forget, we had the Holocaust.
Exactly.
Adolf Hitler and so forth. And we had that. And a lot of the people are going to say, also we had a lot of science. We had a lot of Einstein. We had a lot of development. People said the Torah and the religion is legend. It doesn't make sense. We can become secular and we can do that. And we have to be strong. We can't be weak because they put us in the ovens of Auschwitz and so forth. We must have a place to protect us because the world is made up of two groups of people, the Jews and then the rest of the world whose reason to be here is to kill all the Jews. Do you understand? You understand? That was this mindset.
But of course, this is if you're coming and then you're speaking in the name of Judaism, then you can't come with these concepts that are totally blasphemous and just contradictory
to the concept that to the Torah and to the traditions of what make up the Jewish tradition.
And then saying you're speaking in the name of Judaism and using the Jewish Torah as a deed and a legitimate.
In the Jewish, you have the Seder, right? You ever think of the Seder? Yes. And you say every year, next year in Jerusalem for 1,000 years.
That's a very, very good point.
And they would say next year in Jerusalem, and there's a longing for that. There's an understanding. There's back to the Second Temple building. All of that.
That's just a very strong point. We have to talk about
right. That's been there, and that's held things together for a very long time.
So Zionism uses that concept.
Well, it's part of the brand. It's part of the brand, brother.
But counting on the ignorance of the masses that mostly, unfortunately, because of the trials and tribulations of the Jewish people suffered through.
Terrible in the 30s.
So there were many communities that were non-religious and were ignorant of the Torah, and they just remember that we say at the Seder, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, the coming year in Jerusalem. Let's touch that concept. Yeah. So the coming year in Jerusalem, but that didn't mean you buy a ticket and you go to Jerusalem. Yeah. That's ridiculous. That could have been done anytime. It meant this spiritual that you were speaking about.
Elevated state.
Let me
the
explain
end time.
Moshiach. Yeah, just give me a moment with God's help to explain that. The Jewish concept is that because as anybody reads the prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all these prophets, you can see what happened was we were put under this this bond with God and the covenant to keep the 613 commandments. We were told by the Almighty that we're going into the Holy Land, but we were put under stipulation that if we are not on the level of this holiness that's required, then God warns us many times in the Torah that be careful that the land should not reject you as it has the nations prior. That
well, that's politically wise.
Because
also spiritually,
Wait, the land should not reject you because they had profaned God's name and so forth. That's what it says. So the Jewish people knew and accepted this bond, and when the prophets came and warned us that we will be sent into exile, we believe that afterwards the destruction of the temple and this whole concept of the decree of exile and to be spread through the diaspora.
Well, that was for sins.
Exactly. Not
you
because
were sinned because
not because of our
by
physical,
God. You were exiled by God.
Not because of our physical ineptness or
because or weakness.
It was a godly decree, and therefore, and the solution therefore has nothing to do with taking a strong army, because you can't fight the spirituality.
It's quite the opposite.
It's quite the opposite.
Quite the very opposite.
So therefore, our hopes and yearning is we constantly hoping that God should accept our wanting and closeness to Him and our
the patience,
exactly.
And one must not try to hasten, and one must not build armies to hasten, and that sort of thing. God, and that was part of the whole mission.
And we believe the same Almighty as was before is continually, and He has full of compassion. He sees our suffering. When the time will come, He will make a spiritual, metaphysical change.
Elevated state.
Elevated state. Exactly. At which time we believe, and that's what our prayers are. And anybody could open the English translation of the prayers, that there will come a time where God will make this metaphysical change, where, as it says, let's just take on the UN. There's the conclave wall, it's called the Isaiah wall, which says there will come a time when they will beat the swards into plowshares and the
pruning hooks
into pruning hooks. And one nation shall not pick up carry out war against another nation.
Beautiful thought. Beautiful thought.
And this is what Judaism is all about. So what we pray for is this, when God should accept our repentance. So then we say, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, the coming year in Jerusalem, not meaning that I'll buy a ticket and we'll go up there and I'm going to take a machine gun and force the people
and an Apache helicopter in case the machine gun's not big enough. That's the way the British used to do with the Gatling gun. They could ridiculous. Run. It's part of imperialism.
So anybody who understands Judaism understands that that's laughable. That has nothing to do with this, what we've been saying for hundreds of years, this coming year in Jerusalem. That's what Judaism is, the one-on-one of Jerusalem.
And you also have this concept, and some people, again, a lot of secular people just make fun of religion. They just make fun. It's just a legend and all that, Santa Claus and that. They make fun of it and they take that position. But they have the concept in the Judaic tradition of the Moshiach. And they had a popular song in Israel not too long ago, a decade or so ago, and they were making fun of this idea of longing for the Mashiach and the transformation and the elevated state of justice.
Well, we say to them,
but they had a popular song that said, the Moshiach isn't coming, he isn't even phoning. They were making a joke of it. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're mocking your idea.
Would it be that they mocked us in public and instead of using our identity to intimidate the world and to gain support from the world, they should openly mock it the way they really believe and the way Zionism constantly beats and brutally and the religious community intimidates them. We have pictures of Jewish people being beaten constantly by the Zionist police all through the years, and it just doesn't get covered by the world media.
Is this a magazine?
This is just compilations of ongoing demonstrations that we have every month, all the time throughout all these sad 100 years that Zionism has been in existence. So it's not only the Palestinian people that suffer; it's the Jewish religious community.
I want to make a link. I don't want it to be. If I may, we were talking, and we have different views, you and I, and so forth. But I don't want to make a link. I don't want to make it link too much to Israel. Okay, or I mean, I would and everything. But the reason is, it's to my way of thinking. I respect very much that idea of an elevated state. You could call it in secular terms or something, a liberation. We used to have chattel slavery in the United States. People were slaves. They had a fugitive slave law that you had to return the slave to slavery. You know what I'm saying? They had to, so history, you begin to get more capability to provide for it, so that we may be coming to an elevated state where you could have what seemed impossible in the historical context, because we were so limited in our capability. We had an ability so that everybody in the world, in the ecology, and all this elevated state that had been part of the tradition of the Torah, as I understand it, would actually be able to be seen. But that you've got all these ersatz things, like, say, I would link it to the United States of America. Now, that's even a larger context.
Yeah,
Israel is an extension. It's an extension of the United States of America, CIA, all these kind of things, working their thing. They're now going and they're going to fight a war against, it used to be the communists that they were against, right? They were against the commies until the Soviet Union imploded. Right. Now it's Islam, right? Well, do you understand?
I understand.
So they got a ready-made enemy, and they got a camp out there, and it's dangerous, and they got, what, how many, 400 atomic bombs? And they've got a deeply felt feeling of persecution out of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. They have this war ginning up against Islam, 1/4 of the world population, and there's this pressure and so forth. So I'm thinking the illegitimacy that might be able to begin to be ascribed to Israel could be equally and transported to an illegitimacy of the system of the United States of America. Now, I think that's a much greater danger, the United States of America. Except it could be the adverse side of weapons unleashed that could destroy the entire species are likely to come out of Tel Aviv because they're getting boxed in. And they're feeling very, very frustrated.
Well, again, we always...
Do you understand? That's getting geopolitical.
Yeah,
but the legitimacy of the people running the show, walking around with big league boots, with Apache helicopters and with atomic bombs and with all the power and everything to require everyone to do what they think, they're not legitimate. The legitimacy has to be questioned in order to get at some dialogue to where we can set things up right. You understand?
I hear what you're saying. I would like to say that we feel that people around the world as a whole and in the United States, we are very thankful for the United States because a lot of this assistance or a lot of this feelings of sympathy for the state of Israel is built, derives from the fact that the Jewish people did suffer by the Holocaust, and it's humane feelings that that people suffered and therefore they should have. But it's unfortunately we feel it's misplaced. In other words, because sympathy and compassion for the Jewish people would be that we should be able to have these people settled throughout the world, or even in Palestine, but under the Palestinian rule to coexist with them. If after World War II, when the Jewish people were in refugee camps, as
awful.
Now my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. My mother's and my father's family, they were all destroyed, basically as a whole.
What part were you? What country? What country?
My father was from. My mother's family originally was from Poland, and her aunts and uncles were killed in Poland. My father's family was Hungarian. As my mother was actually born in Hungary.
I'm very sorry.
But wait, and my father escaped through Italy, came to the United States.
Horrible.
Now again, there's these people. I mean, they suffered terribly. There's no question. And but the Holocaust, to be used, let's say abused, by this concept of Zionism. In other words, because the Jewish people suffered, so it's a point of intimidation, and that people are afraid to speak up against Zionism and what they do because they shouldn't be equated with Nazis. Or people are fearful they'll right away say, oh, you like the Nazis or things like that. Now, basically, as I said, my grandparents were very religious people, and they were from the anti-Zionist community. Now, they died as Jews. Dying as Jews means to uphold the Torah. The concept, therefore, that they should be now, let us say, a parable, metaphorically speaking, that they should be dug up now to rebel against God. They died as Jews, and now they'll be used to rebel against by supporting and building this state of Israel, which is a direct rebellion against God, is just unfathomable. It's terrible because these people died. At least they died as Jews, and now they're going to be used to against a rebellion against God. In other words, a rebellion against God, and the whole concept of the state, that it gets support. They make Yad Vashem, they make all these things.
What's Yad Vashem?
Yad Vashem is the historical, the museums that they build around the world, and in Jerusalem, and in Washington, to show the terrible destruction, the terrible Holocaust.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they use it to gain support and sympathy for the state of Israel. That is wrong.
Okay.
Because yes, the destruction is terrible, and it should be remembered. But to be used as a rebellion, as to be used today, you should gain support for something which is really flying in the face of Judaism, that we're not allowed to have a state.
But
and the oppression of the Palestinian people. We keep on talking about how that they're oppressed. These Palestinian people, the people in Gaza, which we'll have to go over to, of course. We just came over.
We got to get to that if we can.
But so this whole concept is wrong. It's dead wrong. You have here people suffer, but they suffered because they were Jews. You mentioned there's like a whole issue about how Zionism, they collaborated, they complacent.
They did.
The Jews
they collaborated with the Nazis.
They were complacent.
The Zionists did. Political Zionists collaborated with the Nazis.
As the people of
Hungary, they had a common interest, and the flag of David could fly in Nazi Germany. Only flag, the swastika and the Palestine of David.
I think there's so much that we won't be able to touch on all that. But basically, there's a book, let's say 51 documents.
That's Mr. Brenner.
Right.
Lenny Brenner, God bless him. He's documented it, chapter and verse.
One of the leaders in Hungarian Jewry was Rabbi Weissmandl. Rabbi Weissmandl tried to save the Jews of Hungary, and he was basically, his efforts were thwarted by, he writes, by the Zionist organizations, and which they didn't want, let's quote Chaim Weizmann. It's very important to hear this quote, because people wouldn't want to believe of that. He was the first president, and he was one who was pivotal in the creation of the state, because he was very close with the heads of England, the leaders, and he helped them in World War I. It's a whole long story how they helped them with that they needed with explosives, and this. It's very well documented, all of this. Now, one of the issues was that they promised he got because of that.
Okay?
I'm okay. I'll manage it. Thank you. The Balfour Declaration and was all written, basically as a thankfulness to Chaim Weizmann. But anyway, Chaim Weizmann, who was, as you say, the first president of the state of Israel. I'm quoting him from his book, but also it was quoted in the Zionist papers alone, the Jewish Press, October 18th, 2002. And I'm quoting him. They had a meeting in 1938, and Chaim Weizmann said, Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. They were talking about, I have to preface this, that they were talking about should they try as a powerful organizations, the Zionist organizations. They have a lot of money. They had a lot of money put together.
Then they had a lot of money.
Yes,
they got buku money now.
And that they would be able to use that money to save Jews.
There's a lot of money involved in this whole thing you're talking about. It involves a lot of money and interest.
So wait, but this is what they said. They had a meeting, what they should do about the Jews, and he wrote, Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. We want only the best of Jewish youth to come to us. We want only the educated to enter Palestine for the purpose of increasing its culture. The other Jews will have to stay where they are and face whatever fate awaits them. These millions of Jews are dust on the wheels of history and may have to be blown away.
More than one cow.
We don't want them pouring into Palestine. We don't want Tel Aviv to become another low-grade ghetto. Now, this is the first president of Israel. These are the fathers of the movement. Understand who we're dealing with, such hypocritical people that they accuse others of being haters of Jews.
They had been.
So you understand. This is the fathers of
Zionism.
Okay,
you're making the point.
But basically, I don't want to. We're not getting it.
But I'm trying to make a point too. I got to make a point once in a while. You got so many, you come out like a Gatling gun. You come like a Gatling gun in that and everything. And the thing is, like, you're Orthodox, and you got an Orthodox view, you see it blasphemy, all of that. Now there are a lot of people of the Jewish persuasion that are not. They're more secularly oriented, right? And what they can report or what they can repair to is like for instance, for good or ill, I'm like what you call an intellectual or something, right? I'm kind of interested in mind and science and things like that. And the contributions that have been made to world society by people of the Jewish persuasion is so overwhelming in terms of the number of Nobel Prize winners, chemists, doctors, physicists, film people, all in all the fields. Their contribution is so overwhelming, and they're saying that they are able to assert that in the interest of a more secularly oriented view of the Jewish experience in the world, and that these other things that just will build upon, but that we can no longer just be weak and placid, go quietly into the ovens of the world, of an anti-Semitic world, and they're still feeling the pain of what was felt in the 30s and so forth. So you understand in a certain sense that the Jewish position, the Reform and the others, and the secular Jews, Noam Chomsky, a lot of people that are of great intellect and so forth, have a role, and they don't particularly have this take on things of the traditional view of religion that you have, and you're celebrating one aspect of the Jewish experience, but that other Jewish experience has a great commitment, and whereas nobody believed in Zionism in the 1920s, everybody practically believes in Zionism in the Jewish community now.
Again, but they have no right, as we started way back, that we were talking about if the Pope would be an atheist. It just doesn't make any sense. And
well, now you're talking like an Orthodox.
But wait, but again,
see it from the standpoint of the secular Jew, the atheist Jew. Try and see it from his perspective.
We're talking again. If they wanted to make a movement, some nationalistic movement,
yeah, that's what they did.
Don't use my identity. We have a religion. This religion is not something that you could bend and pick and choose and do what you want, because this is Judaism. Now, wait.
We've got a PR industry. We can do whatever we want with those. You know, they can bend it anyway. It's a brand. It's a brand that they can put any patina on that they want in order to get a certain vote.
This is fraud. Judaism is real. Just you cannot take Christianity and change it into Buddhism. You can't, or whatever, or atheism or something, because you understand. Wait, this is a religion. You can't take Judaism just because you have numbers or you have some distinguished scientists or whatever you want.
400 atomic bombs.
So let us just say, if they would use these concepts and say we want to make some type of nationalism with a lot of number of Jews, then that would be one thing.
They didn't have to say it. They did it.
Using
they didn't have to say it. They didn't have to say it. They just did it. So they actually were men of action, and they did it, and they didn't march into the ovens.
It is not Judaism. So we want,
no, it's
first
not.
Of all,
it's something else. It's part of
Judaism. When it's being used in the UN.
But do you not count those people part of the Judaic community? What do you think? Do you think
they don't
are
represent. They
heretics, or what do you think?
Each individual person has to be judged what they are, but as a whole, they cannot now transform Judaism into something else and use this as a historical document.
They have done it.
United States call it the Jewish homosexuality. The Jews belong in Palestine because it was given to them by God, when they're totally ignoring the other parts of the Torah that says that we are forbidden to do this to the Palestinian people.
Doesn't it happen all the time? Somebody will take a thing and
they'll turn
the Irish
into... There's a lot of frauds in this world. That doesn't give this any legitimacy. It
happens all the time in the world of advertising.
There's a lot of killing. There's a lot of stealing, and that does not make it legitimate.
Okay.
Now wait.
Okay. But you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
How do you feel towards your fellow Jewish people that are reformed
talk
or
about
atheists?
Well,
can you get along with them any better? Do you get along with them any differently than you would with a Gentile?
Well, it hurts us.
Or with the others?
It hurts us terribly when we see these people that are, unfortunately, as a general rule, it's born out of ignorance of their religion, that they totally are being misled by the Zionist leaders. We're not condoning what they're doing, but we're saying they're being misled by Zionism and the leaders, and the powerful, the endless well of money that they have, that they infuse into Jewish education around the world.
That's a big incentive. Money is a big incentive for human behavior and thought.
Now we were going back to the United States. We were mentioning that a lot of people, the human race and people around the world, it comes a lot of it because of the sympathy for the Jewish people, and we're thankful for them for what they have sympathy. But we're saying, instead of helping the Jewish people individually to get settled and whatever it was, and by supporting Israel, not only are they contributing to something which we think is, which is against God and is flawed, but ironically, and Zionism in the state of Israel is the greatest factory of exacerbating anti-Semitism and creating a hate for the Jews.
Ironic.
And a rift.
It's ironic.
And it's
ironic
because Jews lived.
Yeah.
Look at history.
Yeah.
Jews lived for hundreds of years in every Muslim country without the UN, without any human rights groups, without a world watching.
Were they persecuted? Were they persecuted
terribly? Now, there were bumps in the road. There were bumps in the road. But what does that mean, bumps in the road? Jewish communities thrived. Jewish communities were God-fearing Jewish communities in Alexandria.
They were in Alexandria. They were in Andalusia.
In every single country, in Tunisia, in Morocco, and even to today, you can find the remnants of these Jewish communities. They were in every single country, and they could have been slaughtered, and they weren't.
No.
In fact, throughout history, when we had the Inquisition, we had the Crusades, when even by World War II, Jews found a safe haven in the Muslim countries. Now, so therefore, and by the way, we are required, according to the Torah.
With some bumps in the road,
There was some bumps in the road.
Yeah, right. Okay, always.
People, it's a different religion.
Yeah, right.
But at the
and
same
there's
time,
cultural differences too.
And we were closer in serving God than any other groups. These two groups, by the way, in our
I think that serves you well, don't you? I think it serves you well if you serve God. Yeah.
And therefore, to go and say, and that, these are our mortal enemies, an ingrained hate from the Muslims. That's the reason for this conflict. That's what they're trying to say. That's the reason for the conflict. And also, like I say,
and it's very dangerous.
According to the Jewish law, we are required to show our gratitude and thankfulness for the good done to us. That's a Jewish requirement.
Yeah.
So we should be showing our thankfulness for the Muslim countries and the Muslim people. And here, like I say, ironically and tragically, there's a rift driven between us. The Jews are taught now that they are our mortal enemies, and the world is told that the mortal enemies of the West, and that they don't suffer other people, they don't take other people amongst them, and we were
and they're
able
now
to live
strong. They were strong,
and we
they
were able
weak.
to live.
They were
amongst
weak.
them.
People were weak in terms of, let's say, fascism.
But we were able to live
weak.
amongst them.
Yeah, but in the fascism it was difficult under Hitler.
Yeah.
Right? But they were horrible.
Right.
Horrible that they had to do.
Yes.
Whole families, your family, everyone. So that's burned. And people understand that. And there's tremendous longing that never again will we be weak. Will we be weak and impotent against the forces of an anti-Semitic world that is out to kill us? We are going to stand strong. And look at our record.
Fear-mongering.
It's
pure fear.
Yeah, but you can understand the fear, can't you?
No,
can we understand the fear and the loathing of what happened during the Holocaust?
That's like I saying abusing the Holocaust, because we're God-fearing people. We
well,
believe whatever. I mean, the time is definitely limited now to get into that, and there's the other subjects we would love.
We're not going to be able to settle in 30 seconds about the Holocaust.
Well,
we got 30 seconds.
Yeah, but basically, like I say, the Holocaust was, we believe, a decree of God. It is a spiritual thing, because it was a punishment of God. We're not prophets. We can't say why. But we can definitely say that this rebellion against God, with as many transgressions, and God is compassionate as the perfect leader of the world, as every Jewish person, when God forbid his relative passes away, they say, we bless the righteous judge.
Yeah.
And even the ones who are more modern will do that, will accept to say, wait, let me finish this thought. But
so we have about 7 minutes, not 30 seconds. I didn't lead you astray.
So basically, we believe that the Holocaust did come out as a punishment of God. We have to be introspective, understand why. Part of it is, of course, like I say, we not say
evil in the person of Hitler, for one.
As individuals, there were great holy men who died and so forth, and we're not judging people, but each one individually, of course, God is perfect and had a reason for. A lot of it was punishment for different things, and again, it's a whole subject to be introspective, and if you believe in the Almighty.
Well, we've got a whole 6 minutes. Can't you get it all down?
So we believe
that
God does good, and everything that happens to a person, good and bad, is directly according to his deeds and how God wanted to rule the world. That's a whole issue in the subject. So we're not getting to that. But to say that that it's because God turned away, God forbid, and therefore we have to take make a physical safety, a country with walls, and that's going to be our savior from such a thing, is blasphemy. And Zionism is rooted in this blasphemy. One of the issues is that they say, "Hey, where was God by the Holocaust? Yeah. Therefore, we're gonna make a safe haven. We have to have an army, a strong army." Realize, just like we said, it is so hypocritical and contrary. If you're a Jew, you believe in the rule of the Almighty, and you believe that by repenting and serving God, that is our protection.
Well, you
being
also
close
have
to the Almighty.
Let
me finish, please, bear with me. But the concept to say that God wasn't there, therefore our Savior is by creating a strong army, is purely rooted in exactly what Zionism is.
Okay, help me out.
Blasphemy, in other words, that God isn't there. We have to protect ourselves, and that's our strength.
Okay.
This is now wait, but
but Mr. Gatling Gun, your rabbi, I got a chance to say something.
No, I'll give you all the opportunity.
Okay, when will come the time?
Opportunity to speak about. We've
only got a couple minutes left,
and we have to. I really would love to just.
Well, you were at Gaza
that.
and you were with the people trying to get in. But the thing I want to ask you here, because we have 5 minutes left, and I want to know, why is there been anti-Semitism existing in the world? Why is that? Because from my way of thinking, the Jewish community has made such enormous enormous contributions to the human condition. They could well be called a chosen people in terms of their contribution.
I can answer that with God's
they have
help.
a very strong sense, secular or
right.
of justice and ethics are very, very strong. Why are there? Why has there existed throughout the years anti-Semitism, which is what is claimed is the lot of the whole world toward this state of Israel that's been asked? Okay. Why is there anti-Semitism? We got about 3 minutes. Could you fill that out for me?
I will try.
Okay. I can't understand it. It makes no sense at all. They're wonderful people.
We believe there's a ruler to the world, and it's written in the Torah that God sends us warnings, just like there's a tsunami. There's other things. We don't say a tsunami or an earthquake, or now, and we have our hearts go out to the people of Haiti that just happened there.
Awful, just awful.
Yeah, so we pray for that God should, help them and
they didn't have enough
back up and what can we say? That send them a speedy recovery and
well,
so
how about
forth,
we could send them some food or something?
Or
how about the starving people? Who, can't we get this world into a place where people can be taken care of?
Let me just please, because
can't we improve
okay. We do. So we fear with it, but like I'm saying, but everything we believe just wasn't random. It's from God. Now, God is perfect. Now, the concept of anti-Semitism, not in regard to Zionism or Israel, but the concept throughout the history where there was a very, very religious Jewish community, and still there was decree against them.
You had a very religious Christian community that had a lot of stupid ideas about Christ killing and that nonsense. I'm sorry, we want to get rid of that.
It was a reminder from the Almighty, we believe, because there's a ruler to the world who gives, not a person can't damage even a hair of a person's head if it's only from the decree of God, that we believe it's a reminder to the people that they should repent, that they should become closer to God, they should be introspective on their deeds. As it says in the book of Jonah the prophet, that they went to the king of Nineveh and said, God's sending a message. So that's what we believe. Everything that happens is from God. Now, when Zionism comes along in the state of Israel and they do this terrible crimes, oppression of a people, and all against God, and they claim anti-Semitism, it's like you break somebody's window and he yells, "Hey, what are you doing to me?" And then let's say the Jewish family say, "Because you're an anti-Semite, yelling at me." That's ridiculous. Zionism is causing the greatest exacerbator of anti-Semitism because people confuse the two, which they want, that you should confuse the two, Judaism and Zionism, think it's one, and then they can claim you're anti-Semitic. That's what we're here for, to let
and that may be the major problem in the world,
and
because that's the most dangerous area of the world.
And we apologize to the people of the Muslim communities that they should know our hearts go out, our hearts cry with the people of Gaza and Palestine, and what's being perpetrated is being done in the name of Judaism, but it's totally not in the name of Judaism. And they should not call it the Jewish state or the Jews, because what they're doing is they're falling into the trap of Zionism, then they could be referred to as anti-Semitic.
Okay, now understand that you are being given trouble by a lot of people of the Jewish community writ large and everything, because you are questioning the legitimacy of the Zionist enterprise. The Hamas is being questioned because they are questioning the legitimacy of the state of Israel. They're recording the legitimacy of the system.
We're not questioning. We're
undercutting it.
We're saying clearly that it's not too questionable that this is totally illegitimate, and according to the world, it would be it's inhumane.
Yeah, but when you're talking illegitimacy, so Hamas is saying they do not accept. They don't think if you get another square foot of land on the West Bank, you're going to be okay, or you can negotiate the wall or something. They say the whole enterprise is illegitimate.
And you know what we say?
Is that what you say?
100%. In fact, we are saying that all the representatives of Palestine, we're not condoning murder, we're not condoning killing, but we're saying the root issue is not that because Hamas or the people of Gaza refuse to recognize Israel, and that's where the problem lies. Well, that's a Zionist propaganda and a ploy to confuse the world.
Okay,
the
same thing can
is Zionism.
Okay,
and it's a new neighbor to the bloc.
Now
Jews
that can be
with
that can be transposed to the United States of America and their running dogs in Peking and every other places that have a system they claim legitimacy historically, and they're not. They need a new system, and we need something new, and that's why it's time for that to come.
I say, we implore them.
So the illegitimacy of Israel can be translated to the illegitimacy of the power structure that runs the world currently and doesn't have a vision worthy of the future.
We implore the leaders of the United States, our distinguished president,
up to freedom. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be
it adds
freedom.
up to real money,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
adds up to real justice,
That's
and it
right.
would be a model.
That's right.
And we need models, don't we?
It'll be a grassroots
How's it going?
expansion.
I know you don't want to. You don't want to say anything, and it's
I don't
too
think
soon.
it's happening. I don't think it's happening there. In Hopeless, it's not happening.
Shucks.
Yeah, I don't think the political process of having to run for office again.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to have to go in and do it, unfortunately. I'm not
Yeah.
going to have, I can't rely on
You're gonna have
anyone
to
else to
clean
do
the
it. I've got to
Agee
go in there
stable
and do it. And
yourself,
I'm going to
huh?
do it.
You have
I'm
to
going to
sweep
knock
out-
on the doors.
Okay, keep
Yeah.
doing it.
Okay.